Hi everybody. The topic of this video is my husband has dementia and I can't cope. I'm struggling. This video is going to include tips for how to make a financial plan for the surviving spouse. Being married to a spouse with dementia can be challenging if you didn't have discussions in the early stages of memory loss, and if you didn't make any plans for the costs of care, how care was going to be provided, and all of that. So if you're a wife caring for a husband diagnosed with early or mid-stage memory loss or dementia, there still may be time to talk about a financial plan to care for your husband and a financial plan to care for you after your husband is gone, assuming that you will be the surviving spouse. Now, that doesn't always happen. Caregiving marriage should be a partnership, which means that the spouse who passes first does not leave the surviving spouse in a situation where they can't pay their bills and they're living at the poverty level. So statistics confirm that the caregiver spouse of a person with dementia doesn't always live longer than the person with dementia. Research confirms, and this has been out there for a long time, 30% of caregiver spouses die before the spouse who needs care. Why? Because caregiving for a person with dementia is emotionally and physically exhausting. It becomes a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week job. So, if you and your spouse can still have conversations, it's time to sit down and talk about the hard realities of the future. Dementia care can be very, very expensive. Care costs for persons with dementia can really eat up the retirement savings of a married couple. Dementia care can cost anywhere, if you're in a community, $7,000 a month, $10,000 a month, $12,000 a month. So you're looking at $80,000 to $100,000 to $120,000 a year. So for what period of time can you pay that much money to care for a spouse? Now, if you're independently wealthy, you have a lot of money, this conversation isn't going to matter to you, right? You've got it handled. But be warned, this video is not for everybody, because if you are past the point where your spouse can talk about this, then this video is not for you. You probably want to click off and go watch another video on my channel. Now, there is a program on my website about dementia care planning. The link is below. So this video really is for couples and spouses of persons with dementia, where the person with dementia can still talk and have conversations about care and care costs and sign legal documents and make plans, okay? So stay with me, and I'm going to share the hard realities and some suggestions for making sure that you can financially take care of yourself if you are the surviving spouse. If this is your first time on my channel, I'm Pamela D Wilson. I'm a caregiving expert, advocate, and speaker with 25 years of experience helping aging adults and caregivers work through all of the health, the financial, the legal issues of caregiving, including navigating these family relationships and having difficult discussions. So, my first bit of advice for any dementia caregiver is to find a support group, whether it's in person or online. I have an online support group. It is called the Caregiving Trap. That's based on the name of my book. It's on Facebook. It's a private group. You can request to join. All caregivers, especially dementia caregivers, need support and practical advice and tips from people who are further along in the process so that you kind of know what's coming up next and you can plan for it. Because knowing what can happen and being able to plan can reduce a lot of the stress and the anxiety and the feelings of, oh my gosh, I can't cope, I can't deal with this, right? So if you're not in a support group, find a group. Now let's talk about money, which is a very uncomfortable topic for spouses, especially the first spouse who becomes ill and may need expensive care. A diagnosis of dementia, or really any type of life-threatening condition, cancer, things like that, is not really a time for denial. It's a time for practicality and saying, yeah, you know what? I may be the one who dies first. Again, not always true. Sometimes the caregiver dies first. But for this video, let's assume that the person with dementia is probably going to pass away first. So if your spouse has dementia and you don't have $10 million in the bank, you may want to consider how you can financially plan to make sure there's money for your husband and make sure that there's money for you. Now, if you know about Medicaid or you've heard about Medicaid, it's a state program for people who have health problems and don't have money to pay for care. Spouses have to spend a lot of money on care before the sick spouse can qualify for Medicaid. But what that does is it impoverishes the spouse who still has to continue to live and survive. So, some couples I have known have consulted an attorney and a tax professional, and they've divided assets early on, 50-50. This is care for the husband with dementia, this is care for the wife for her care. It takes advanced planning because Medicaid has a 5-year look-back period. So you want to do this as early as possible, which is why if your husband's just been diagnosed with dementia or you're the spouse who's just diagnosed with dementia, these conversations are practical. Now, for women watching where your husband has this early diagnosis, talking about money is important. And as a woman or as the wife, you may be feeling uncomfortable bringing this up because you're thinking, well, he's going to think I'm more interested in money than himself. Or maybe if you didn't have a career and you weren't saving the money, you're worried that your husband's going to have a fit. Well, you know what? If you don't initiate this conversation, you're going to be the one who suffers when your husband dies and he has to go on Medicaid and you're thinking, how on earth am I going to pay the mortgage? How on earth am I going to pay my health insurance premiums? Where am I going to live? This didn't turn out the way I thought. So while you think, oh, we married for better or worse, blah, 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 it makes no sense to spend all of the family assets on one spouse and leave the other spouse to live in poverty. Now, clients I've known who've done this, it didn't mean that they had to get a divorce. It just means that they created a financial plan for the surviving spouse, right? So again, it may mean that money and property are divided 50-50. Money's in your husband's name, money is in your name, so that if your husband lives longer than you think and needs Medicaid, it's easy to apply, he can qualify, and it doesn't affect the money that you have to care for yourself. So sometimes though, spouses have told me, my husband doesn't want to talk about it. He wants me to be the caregiver. I'm not sure I can do this. Well, then I have seen couples who have gotten divorced over these kinds of things and who've separated assets. And believe it or not, the wife still took care of the husband. She just made sure that she was going to be taken care of. So every situation is different. You got to figure it out. Don't assume that your kids are always going to take care of you. And do you really want to burden your kids with the financial responsibility of having to care for you when they may have kids who are your grandkids, right? And they may need to save for their own retirement. So this money conversation is really, really important. Now let's talk about care. This is like a main stressor. The act of being that caregiver day in and day out, eventually it is going to be a 24-hour-a-day care situation, whether you realize it or not. If you're the wife, you may not be able to leave your husband due to safety reasons. And even before this time, maybe your husband was walking out the front door and you were having to put little locks there to make sure that he didn't walk out the front door and get lost and not come back. Or maybe your husband used to be the cook and he's turning on the stove burners, but he's not turning them off. Or he goes in the bathroom and he turns on the faucet to brush his teeth and forgets what he went in there for, and then the water's running and it overflows and you have a flood in the house, right? These things happen. Now, on the other hand, you may have the sweetest, most lovable husband who doesn't do any of these things and he doesn't have any behaviors. That is a blessing. That is rare. For everybody else whose husbands with dementia or Alzheimer's have behaviors like they don't want to take their medications, they're not going to bathe today, they're not hungry, You're trying to change their adult incontinence briefs and they're fighting you every step of the way. Maybe they have repetitive behaviors like they pace through the house or they have to follow you 1 foot behind you everywhere you go and you feel like you never get even a moment to yourself. You're even worried when you're in the bathroom, like what they're doing out in the rest of the house, right? Some husbands can become angry or physically violent. Some hit or strike out. This is part of dementia and it's hard to predict. Eventually, the person you care for may be awake all night and you're trying to sleep. And then during the day when you're up, what are they doing? They're sleeping. Others may experience episodes of incontinence. You find that you're changing bed sheets and clothes and everything twice a day. If they have complicated health issues, maybe you're dealing with blood pressures and insulin or INR readings or oxygen or even home dialysis or things like that. So as you can see, depending on where you are in the journey, it's different. Early on, pretty easy. Mid-stage, a little more difficult. Toward the end, very time-consuming, very emotionally draining, a lot of worries. It's a full-time job. And this is why the thought of keeping a loved one, a husband with dementia home until they die is not always possible or practical because of the caregiver who's having to do all these things. And if you're the 24-hour caregiver, when do you make time to care for yourself? When do you go to the doctor? When do you go to exercise? When do you even get a mental break so that you can just calm down from all the stress and the anxiety? If you don't have money set aside to pay for in-home care, you're probably not going to be able to do that. If you don't have money to put your husband in a care community, you're not going to be able to do that until he can access Medicaid, which means that if there is money, you're going to have to spend money on care to get to the point where he can access Medicaid. Then let's just talk about the practical physical issues. Your husband is 6 feet tall and he weighs 200 pounds. You're 5 feet tall and you weigh 100 pounds. How are you going to move him around? You're going to end up hurting both of you trying to get him in and out of bed or in and out of the tub or in and out of the shower, right? Eventually, your husband may forget how to walk and he may become wheelchair bound. If you're not strong enough, how are you going to push him around? And is your house even wheelchair accessible? Can you get the wheelchair through a door? There's a lot of practicalities that people do not think about. So watching this happen and trying to figure out what's going to happen next can be emotionally distressing and it can make it difficult to cope. If you have kids, talk to them early. Don't isolate them from everything that's going on. Don't always expect them to be the caregiver, though. Again, find other ways to do that. I know some wives who just pray for the end of the suffering. It's not like they are saying, oh gosh, I want my husband to die, but it's just this is so hard. It's so hard for me. My husband's suffering. He doesn't even remember who I am anymore. There's no quality of life. He lays in bed all day. I have to feed him. I have to do everything, right? And if you've been doing this for 5, 10, or 15 years, it's probably affecting your physical health and your mental health. Realize that you've done the best job you could, regardless of the situation. Do whatever you can to find help, find care alternatives for your spouse so that you can cope with what's going to happen next if this person lives another 2, 3, or 5 years, because you never know. Whatever you do, do not neglect your health. You may be perfectly healthy and think that you can go on and do this forever. Probably not. Something is eventually going to happen to your health. You need to be in good health to continue to be that caregiver and care for your husband and yourself. So, next steps from this video. If you're not in a support group, find one, join one. Again, the Caregiving Trap on Facebook. Ask to join. If you have not talked to your husband about making a financial plan for the surviving spouse, that would be you, get that conversation scheduled. If you need help having it, you can contact me. I'll help you have it. I do online consultations. Plan for what happens next. What happens when your husband's up all night? Do you know how to hire an in-home caregiver? Have you both gone out and looked at assisted living and care communities so that if your husband had to move somewhere, at least he had a say early on and like, yeah, I like this place and I don't like that place, right? These are things that people never think of. Being married, caring for a spouse, it is a partnership, which means planning for both spouses, the spouse who needs care and the surviving spouse. Don't feel guilty about having these conversations. You should have these conversations. It's part of life. I thank you all so much for being here. I'm Pamela D Wilson. I'm a caregiving expert, advocate, and speaker. Links to my website, caregiver support, are below here. Please like, share this video with other people you know. Comment, say thank you so that other people can find these videos. You are also welcome to make a video topic request and share your story. I look at all of the requests and I respond to all of the stories. I'll see you all again soon in another video.